Jaryd, Rob, morning. How are you guys doing? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ricky. Nice to
Morning,
be here.
Ricky. Thanks for having us.
Nice to have you guys here, man. And I don't normally do this. This is a morning recording. We had to go backwards and forwards to find a gap. We're all very busy working men, but I'm glad we could do this. And for once, drinking coffee and not whiskey on a show it's a nice change.
Totally.
So,
it's a good way to start the morning discussing the future and what should be, what will be.
And not drinking whiskey.
Yeah,
It's always So, guys, just Jaryd, maybe you kick us off here. Just tell us a little bit about what the Knowledge Trust is and what you guys do.
Sure. So the Knowledge Trust is a social enterprise. We exist to make education more accessible sustainably. And we do this because we genuinely want to realize a world where everyone has an equal opportunity to reach their potential. That is our vision. We think that it's only fair. And right now, that's just not the case. Most individuals in South Africa and in many places in the world have an incredible amount of roadblocks in their way that prevent them from advancing their career. They can't get access to education. They can't get access to earning opportunities. They can't contribute to supporting themselves, their families. They can't contribute to economic growth. It's a bit of a shit show. So what the Knowledge Trust does is we built a community. On the one side, we've got about 450,000 young people in South Africa and Nigeria. Those are our members and opportunity seekers. On the other side, we have about 450 to 500 commercial partners. These are businesses, funders, NPOs, NGOs, education providers, training providers, etc. And what we do is everything we can to bring those two sides of our community together in as frictionless a way as possible to just bridge that gap and hopefully enable everyone that utilizes the platform to gain value and just take a step forward.
So do you do placements for internships as well as like other forms of like tertiary training? So would you provide courses as well as like practical placements with a company?
Yeah, so importantly, we don't provide the education ourselves. We're a connector. So we've got companies and education providers who have these opportunities available. So company X would want to onboard 10, 50, 100 interns or learners or apprentices or whatever that may be. In South Africa specifically, that can be quite challenging to do in a meaningful way. Because of the disparity between opportunities available and opportunity seekers. If a company was to put out an ad, they'll get thousands or tens of thousands of applications. And this generally leads to, I wouldn't say bad hires, but definitely not the most effective way of hiring talent. And this limits their ability to realize ROI on their investment. And then they're generally quite reluctant to do it again because they're not getting the return. So what we do is we use our technology and our platform to do this for them at scale. So we're not scared of the volume of applications because we've got some fancy tech that helps screen applications down, helps assess those candidates so that we're making sure we're putting the right bum in the right seat to the right thing. And we then support them on a 12-month journey after they've been placed. And this really gives all stakeholders in the ecosystem the highest probability of successful investment in realizing that return. And then hopefully they do that again. Other things we do is help those businesses distribute funds that they have allocated to education, either via their CSI budgets or their L&D budgets, in the most effective way. So if you're going to spend R1 million on educating young people, what's the best way to do that so that you're actually setting the young people up for success in a way that is sustainable for the future? So again, we're just a connector. We've got opportunity seekers, opportunity providers. How do we bring them together in a way that makes sense?
Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, you've got like a recruitment firm side, which is dealing with companies and sifting through applications, etc. But then you've also got an education side, and you bring those two together in one business model. And are you relying on the education side through conventional channels, like finding education through our South African university system, or are you doing that as well as like short courses offered by global institutions as well?
Yeah, thanks. It would be great to provide context on that. So at our core, we're a social enterprise. Our mission is purpose before profit, mission before money. We're not here to make millions and billions. We're here to change the world. And we want to do that through education. We believe that educated people make better decisions, educated people live happier, healthier, better lives. And the reality is 75% of young South Africans specifically are either uneducated or underemployed. So what we do is, on the education side, we try to do everything we can to pair our members with an opportunity that will take them forward right now, but that will also be done as best we can in a timeless way that positions them for the future. So on the one side, we've got the traditional bursaries at the UCTs, the Stellies, the FITs, those types of things. Those are typically funded by corporates. That is where the money comes from. We have to support those businesses because that's our revenue engine to keep us going. But on the other side, we're trying to equip our members and individuals in general with timeless, essential skills that will help them move forward independently of whatever competency they may have right now or may want to have. And those are done through what we call Nano Courses. At the moment, they're delivered primarily through WhatsApp, just because it's really affordable and accessible to our membership. And the Nano Courses that we build are always related to a soft or essential skill like curiosity, growth mindset, accountability, financial literacy, things that every individual needs to understand and most often isn't taught in either secondary or tertiary school. And they don't have the social capital or the networks at home to teach them these skills just because of the backgrounds that they come from. So it's not one or the other. We try to do them in combination to set someone up for success as best as possible. But I think the education system as a whole is ripe for reform. Many of the skills that are being taught in the current system probably and almost definitely aren't the right skills for the jobs in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's a whole nother challenge that hopefully one of our partners will address at some point, and then we can plug them into the platform and make it accessible.
Yeah, man, there's so many different directions we can go on this one. I mean, the education system myself, having been I spent a lot of time in education or being educated. Well, put it this way, being schooled, not necessarily being educated. And that's the key distinction, right? Like the being ready for the job market and what actually that role entails is the gap between what you're taught, even at a prestigious university, and what actually the role is in the workplace is very different. And often it might just be a 6-hour course that fundamentally shifts your perspective on how you do certain things and the value you can add in a business. And is that kind of where you guys come in with these nano courses, or where you can, I suppose, move the needle for people relatively inexpensively?
Yeah, so yes and no. Most of the work that we do at the moment, and what we're trying to really do is educate at scale. And what we can't do is limit these essential skills and this training to individuals who have gone through the public university system and even the private colleges, because the reality is that most young South Africans don't. There's a massive dropout rate pre-matric, and the rate of people that navigate from matric successfully into the tertiary schooling system it's tiny. So really what we have is a population that has a very low education base. So they don't have the technical skills, and they don't have the softer essential skills to help them navigate. But that's why we're building these nano courses to equip our members with values. Values like a growth mindset, which teach them that no matter what your circumstances are right now, you can change them. No matter what you want to be, despite your lack of access to funds, you can get there with a lot of hard work and a lot of commitment. It is possible. And we really just believe that's the best thing we can do. If we can teach people how to live a life of values and to be curious and ask questions and seek the truth and show up, then that's our way of helping them take their step forward. Again, they are going to need some sort of technical skill at some point, but that's up to them as an individual. We can't mandate to them what they should or shouldn't learn. We can equip them with the skills to say, here, you're at this beautiful lake with some really tasty water, go drink.
Yeah, man, and it's very interesting, because that sounds to me like it's a culture of personal responsibility you guys are trying to foster in your community, which that was never ever raised in my university education. And I mean, why do you guys think that? Obviously, you're doing something different to what mainstream tertiary or bulk education is doing. What is it you think that sets you guys apart? Is it that approach to like instilling practical values that have real world effects, or how are you guys doing it differently to a UC or a Stellenbosch, for example?
So again, we don't, they're not mutually exclusive. We don't work against any education institution. Really, what the Knowledge Trust exists to be is a platform where every education provider in the entire world can plug into and make their offerings accessible. We purely want to connect those who want to advance their career with partners who are offering an opportunity to allow them to do that. I think all that we're doing differently, I think we're doing many things differently, but we're not trying to understand or push a specific skill down a particular individual's throat. So the big talk right now is 4IR, digital skills. And then you hear that there's a lot of investment going to manufacturing and agriculture, which is in many ways quite contradictory to that. So what skills do we actually need to teach now? I think the market will determine that. All we can do is create a platform that brings people together. And I feel like I'm harping on about that. I'm sorry if I am. But yeah, we're not fighting against anyone. We're literally just trying to say anyone can do anything. There's lots of institutions that will teach different skills. How can we put that onto a platform where no matter what you want to do, you can achieve that? And then I guess educate the youngsters on the opportunities that are available to them, because in many times they don't know or understand. And I think specifically right now, and Rob will speak to this, I would say that a minute fraction of our 450,000 members have even thought about what does Bitcoin mean to their future, either from an education perspective or from a income earning perspective. And it's really, really, really important that we learn everything we can about what the future holds, so that we can digest that, synthesize it, and pass that on to our members for their benefit, again, so they can make an informed decision in the future.
Maybe I'll just add a comment there. Our model is very much one of partnerships. So we avoid creating educational content like the plague. We will do it only under extremely necessary circumstances, because our primary goal is to find partners. So, for example, our first Nano course was in partnership with the South African College of Applied Psychology, and they effectively built a growth mindset course for us. It's probably been our most successful Nano course. We've recently partnered with Bitcoin Magazine out of the States to build a Bitcoin short course also on WhatsApp. So, if there's a key skill that's needed and we can't find a partner, we might do it ourselves. But for the most part, we're not the expert in these things. We are the community, and we're just trying to bring the partners together with our community.
I think that's such a powerful approach, because why recreate the wheel? There's people out there who are very good at creating content and creating educational content, probably much better than you or I will ever be at it. All we need to do is bring them to the market, and that is exactly what you guys are doing. And Jaryd, just something you said earlier that resonated with me a lot is like, no one ever told me when I was in high school and I was struggling with programming. I remember doing Java in like standard 8. If only my computer science teacher at that time was like, listen, bro, let me tell you a thing. Being a database administrator is going to pay you more than being a neurosurgeon. So learn this shit and don't waste your time on like going after these traditional avenues. I mean, this is 2003, so like things were a bit different. Maybe no one could understand how big, tech would become at that point in time. But surely a tech teacher, computer science teacher, and no offense to him, he's a brilliant guy. But I just wish that level of explanation was happening in the high school already, where they're sitting you down and telling you these are your real options. Like it's not just being a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant. Like, you can be anything, which is what they did tell you a lot of, but then they didn't focus that in like the right direction. So
20 years later, we should be going to the standard 8s and telling them that Lightning node administration is going to be where the career is at. Forget neuroscience, forget actuarial science, figure out how to manage a Lightning hub.
Destroy a banker, run Lightning today. And this is a great opportunity. Like, we should be going to high schools, if they'll not throw us out, I suppose, for saying this, and being like, listen, guys, You see how messed up the world is? This is because of bankers. If you want to fix the world, learn how to run a lightning node. And, you know, hopefully...
Look, I've
that
always found
changes
it
a few minds.
I found it very peculiar the way we're not taught anything about money at school. When I went to school, I wasn't even taught accounts. I mean, I know many schools do that, and maybe my old school does now, but I wasn't taught. And I was the most entrepreneurial school-going child you could ever meet. And I didn't get any of those skills at the school. But money is so central to our lives, and it took me until the age of 40 to start thinking about it, let alone learning about it. And
Rob, there's no way
we
you're
don't.
40 yet.
Thank you for saying that, Ricky. I'm 43 as of last week. And I never thought about money, even though my favorite thing in the world is to try and make it. I don't actually care about the money itself, but I'm like, money is like my runs on a scoreboard. I'm just an entrepreneur who has fun. And, but I never thought of what is this? You know, what are we actually dealing with? And yet it's half of our transactions and no one thinks about it. And I think, you know, an entry-level high school course on the basics of money and the financial system would go a long way to creating a better world.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And there's probably a micro course right there in that. How does money work?
Well, the Bitcoin course does delve into that a bit.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Because this is essentially like money is one half of every single transaction, right? And I totally agree with you. Like no one taught us this at school. No one. When I was doing accounts in standard 6 and 7 before I dropped it because it was all in Afrikaans and my accounting teacher was not my favorite, but I was like, this is boring, you know. But if someone had sat me down and said, okay, like the monetary system functions like this, bankers are able to print money out of nothing, hand it out to the other banking buddies who then amplify it and create more of it out of nothing. And this is why essentially the cost of everything goes up and the 1% keeps getting richer and everyone else gets poorer and poorer. Maybe then I would have been more interested, you know, and it probably would have changed my career trajectory, or taken me sooner to get to where I am now. But anyway, I think that like explaining useful skills and the way the world really works to people at an early fundamental stage in their development is very important, because we sit in high school and we're doing algebra and no one's explained to you why this is super important. Where you're going to use this. And I think that's why if people don't understand the application, they end up just being like, well, why am I learning this, you know? Yeah, it's an interesting model. Like, how did we get to this point in education that is the accepted model and that's how it works kind of globally? It's weird.
Well, the education system hasn't changed for decades. So it's just, I mean, if I look at our community specifically, I mean, if we just go back to what you said earlier, how do we tell them at a young age about the career paths that are available to them? I mean, our experience right now is it's very, very, very difficult to do that at scale, because it is quite a personal conversation, and there are 8 to 10 million young South Africans currently sitting at home economically inactive and just have no idea what to do with their lives. But I think there's two principles. So one is teaching them the actual concept of money, what it is, how it works, which is incredibly important. But I think we're going to hit a challenge when trying to teach someone about money when they don't have it will be even more challenging, because they don't really have, like, for them, money is how am I going to buy bread at the end of the month, or money is the social grant that they're going to get from the spa when they go swipe their SASSA card. For them, it's literally just a means to an end, hand to mouth every single month. I mean, that is a challenge in itself. And I think we need to tackle them simultaneously. We need to help them we need to help them create a life for themselves where money is a tool to help them advance and get better. But yes, they absolutely need to understand how money is going to change in the next 2, 5, 10 years, because it is going to be very, very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great segue into Bitcoin, because, you know, I only started understanding money when I started understanding Bitcoin. Like, it was dry and sciencey and boring. I say this as a scientist, but like it was very boring until there was utility associated with it, and I was like, oh, there's this cool thing called Bitcoin. Now it makes sense for me to learn about money. But to take it back to the 8 to 10 million young people sitting at home with no chance, well, no employment and not really an idea what to do. The biggest problem I see facing poor people in South Africa is they have no way to save in a form that respects their time and stored labor. So in other words, they have no way of getting ahead. They don't own a stock portfolio that is inflation resistant. They don't own real estate that is inflation resistant. So the two major assets that are available to middle and upper class people in South Africa to protect them from inflation and to keep creating generational wealth so their kids don't start from that low base is not available to people living in townships. So if they are able to save 500 Rand a month in rands in their Capitec savings account, giving them 3.5% interest, and inflation unofficially is 7.5%, but officially is 7.5%, but unofficially it's probably 15%. They're just going backwards. There's no way they're going to be able to pull themselves out, and they don't know it's happening. This is the most ridiculous part of it all. So this is why I'm so passionate about Bitcoin in the South African context, and specifically Lightning in the South African context, because if you can't get if you can't get 5 rands worth of Lightning sats into someone's hand, you're not going to get that mass adoption. You're not going to be able to bring mass amount of people out of poverty, because you've got to take a multi-pronged approach here. Like education obviously is a sustainable long-term way to bring them out of poverty, but in the shorter to medium term, you just need to give them the ability to save in something that respects their time, because effectively they're having their time stolen from them by energy vampires, which are bankers, because they are able to create more money, which literally just sucks the purchasing power out of your stored money, which is your stored time, and that's why the poor will just, in the current framework, especially with so much money printing going on like we have today, like how are they ever going to get out of that? And the very select few that are either connected politically or are able to excel because they are one of the very, very few amount of people that are phenomenally good at something they apply themselves to and manage to pull themselves out of that situation themselves. For the vast majority, that's not going to be the case. And I think the biggest way to raise people out of poverty is literally just have them save in a money that respects their time. I don't know, Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest about a shortfall here. It's a money that respects their time, as long as you're not talking in time frames of a few months, because I after years of trying orange pilled my mom about 2 months ago, and my dad reminds me frequently that they made a terrible decision because the price is obviously down. But the way I like to look at it is that, and again, I had to learn about money through Bitcoin to get to this realization that if you are earning a salary in an inflationary currency, you have to earn your salary twice. You first have to get your paycheck, and then you have to stop your money going backwards. And I think, at whatever inflation rate you're talking about, people inherently understand that their money loses value, whether it's at 20% or 2%. And so you either have to become a fund manager or you have to pay a fund manager. So it's either you're going to pay with your time or you're going to pay with your money. And, a lot of fund managers are very, very good at taking money and not that good at growing capital. And so I think that's, again, I never considered this. I mean, I lived my whole life that way. I'd entrepreneur, make a bit of cash now. Where am I going to store it? And I think when you look through that paradigm, that for me has been a useful way of getting people to say, okay, maybe there's a different way. And then, to Lightning, that was for me the mental accelerator. I've known about Bitcoin for over 10 years. I didn't buy enough of it when it counted. If they taught us money at school, Ricky, we both would have been buying Bitcoin at $7 when I first found out about it. And then I bought.
Our backgrounds would be Lamborghinis and not our houses.
we wouldn't be having this conversation. No, I mean, and again, I bought my first in 2014, and I ended up spending it within 3 years on stupid things because I didn't understand. Because for me at the time it was a speculation. I started down the Bitcoin rabbit hole in 2020, but it was really about 6-9 months ago and I'd heard of Lightning for the last 4 years, but when I did a Lightning transaction, and that just absolutely blew my mind because there's never been anything. They say it takes at least a 10x, if not a 100x, improvement in quality to disrupt a monopoly. And the current financial system is a monopoly. And Bitcoin alone, I don't believe, was that 10x or 100x change. I mean, maybe in a generation's time, once Justin Trudeau's taken everyone's bank account, then it has a real use case. But day to day, I didn't think it was that. when I saw that Lightning payment, that's when I realized this is going to change the whole world, because this gives us that medium of exchange opportunity in a way that is truly revolutionary. I mean, it's, I don't need to convince you, but it's low cost, it's instant. And then when you take it down to an African context, I mean, that's how I orange peel people. I used to sit across the table at a coffee and, fiat this and, 21 million. No, I don't do any of that now. I say, pull out your phone, download Blue Wallet. Here's 21 Satoshis. By the way, you can now send that to someone else instantly. So within 60 seconds, you've opened up a bank account, you've received funds that are fully cleared that you can now spend. And that's going to turn the whole world on its head. I mean, not only as a savings technology, but there's so much convenience that brings to your life. There's so much security and safety. You look at the streams of cars leaving Kiev right now, and how many of those cars are filled with valuables. But if you just had 12 words in your head, you just jump on your motorbike and off you go, and you don't take anything with you. You've got it all in your head. And I think we don't appreciate it that much in South Africa. We certainly appreciate it more than they would in really westernized Europe and in the Americas. But if you've had any friends who've lived in Zim, then it's real. Because you had to have left with your valuables and your worldly wealth on your back.
Well, we all have friends and family who live in Canada, and they're going through this right now. And if you had have told me a year ago that Canadians were going to be the ones suffering financial repression, I'd have been like, no, probably not.
I would never have guessed it.
Or Australia for that matter. But now, put it this way: in Canada, if you are unvaccinated, you cannot leave the country, and then if you go and protest the government because they won't let you leave, they will shut down your bank account. In a G7 country, this is the scenario right now, and it is only Bitcoin that fixes this, because they have no other means of you cannot use any other banking rail. You can't use GoFundMe, obviously. You can't use PayPal. You can't use any other system that touches a traditional rail. Is the Eye of Sauron is on it. They've completely captured that entire system, and we've had these conversations about Bitcoin solves the store of value problem for a lot of people in the third world, like we just discussed now about getting out of the inflation trap. But it solves government overreach in the first world, which I think this is where government overreach is becoming painfully apparent in the nanny state. So, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, these are places where if most people think governments, a lot of governments most governments didn't speak out against Canada. Why is that? They spoke out against Russia. I mean, no disrespect. I mean, what Russia is doing now is pretty horrific. But why did first world governments not speak out against Canada going full authoritarian? And that's because they're taking notes, in my opinion. They're looking at this and they're like, oh, this is pretty effective. This is how we squash dissent. Because no government likes dissent at all, no matter how liberal you say they are. I mean, to be honest, most liberal governments don't like dissent at all, because that seems to be the liberal order of today. The word liberal doesn't mean what it meant 30 years ago. But Jacinda Ardern and whoever the Prime Minister of Australia is now, it changes every year, who knows. But they're looking at this and they're like, this is a good way to squash dissent, and these domestic terrorists, we can now shut down their accounts. So Bitcoin obviously fixes that, and Justin Trudeau is the biggest orange pillar in the world right now.
But look, I think, Ricky, we have to be honest. It fixes it in a surface simple way, but practically it's not there yet. While
I agree with you.
while those truckers can't take their, let's say for argument's sake, phone with a Bitcoin wallet and take it to a store and transact, we're not going to, I do believe that Bitcoin is inevitable, largely because of game theory, but I don't want to rest on that complacency, because for me, until we have a critical mass of merchants that are joyfully accepting Bitcoin, it's not there. Because at the end of the day, you've got to be able to turn that store of value into stuff that you can eat, that you can live in, that you can transport yourself with, what have you. And there is still a huge risk in big nations, at least for a generation, that they can block those output points. And look, we can all, jump ship to El Salvador, maybe Honduras in the next couple of months. it does look a little kind of better for fishing, in my opinion, Honduras. So I'm hoping they go Bitcoin. So we can do that, sure, but I prefer to, be in South Africa, and so I think the thing we need to solve here is merchant adoption, and it's a really, really difficult problem to solve because, I've got my butcher accepting Bitcoin, and it's been 2 months, and so far.
Is your butcher Farmer Angus?
No, it's
because Farmer Angus is
Meat.
accepting Bitcoin as well.
Okay, that's great. Super Meats, Kenilworth Main Road. Please, someone go and be his second Bitcoin customer.
100%. I'll be there.
And they accept Lightning payments.
Brilliant. Even better.
Yeah. I mean, I must say the one good thing about the price drop is that I bought a little bit of Bitcoin at about $65,000, and I've decided to spend all of it because I don't have to pay capital gains if I've gone down. And so all those microtransactions, which you think, this is a taxable event. It's only a taxable event if you're in the positive. So I've got some money there, and I've just decided every coffee shop, every restaurant I can possibly find, I'm going to try and pay with this until hopefully the price goes up, and then I pull back because that tax calculation is going to be a nightmare.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So this merchant adoption story, it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario, because while we're in Bitcoin, money proceeds through various adoption phases. There's a life cycle to this thing, and like store of value is the first place that money has to, starts as collectible, then it moves to store of value, then unit of account. So to get a merchant or to get a user to try to spend his store of value as a unit of account is like a paradox, right? Because he's like, why do I want to spend this thing that in 10 years' time is going to be able to buy me 100 times more than what I'm buying today? And I think necessity is going to be what drives that. So if you're in a point, this is why I say Trudeau is orange pilling so many people, because the trackers, for example, they can only spend Bitcoin now. They don't have bank accounts anymore. And this is a highly digitized society. Their banking rails are all digitized. So cash is like 2% of the economy. Most people are paying with tapping their cards, for example. And now all of a sudden they can't. So they now have to make a plan. So what I imagine is going to happen is obviously Bitrefill's volume is going to go through the roof because people are going to be buying vouchers of Bitcoin and they're going to be spending through vouchers. That's probably happening at large scale. And I mean, I saw the guys organizing the Bitcoin donations in Canada were handing out, private keys in an envelope, 8K's worth of private keys to trackers saying, here's money for you guys. Those trackers have to go figure out how to spend it now. I am sure that there's a lot of merchants sympathetic to the Bitcoin or to the tracker cause who are now also Bitcoiners because they've also been cut off from the financial system because they might have served a coffee to a tracker because this is literally the draconian system they're living under. If you touched a tracker's financially, if you touched any support, anything, they shut you off, which is Orwellian, like it's unreal. But anyway, these merchants are now like, okay, cool. So I don't have a choice either. I guess I'm accepting Bitcoin now, and then this is how it gains momentum. So I totally agree with you. Merchant adoption is what is going to drive this thing, but it's going to have to be spurred on by something, and it's a two-pronged attack. It's going to be us going out there and like teaching merchants how to adopt it. So we got to be there to support them and help them. But I think the primary driver is going to be government overreach. That's just going to be like clamping down the traditional financial system, because if you've got a hammer, everything's a nail, and all government has is hammers, So
although I can't see the Canadian, I mean, look, I wouldn't have predicted Canada, but I can't see that Canadian situation replicating itself here in any time soon. No. And I just want to say, just for the record, like, the trackers were, I'm kind of with them, but I don't think you should get to block key roads and things like that. But what Trudeau should have done is have them arrested and have them prosecuted in a court of law, because we have laws to deal with that kind of stuff. And for me, the issue I have is the unilateral, no due process, shut down, guilty until proven innocent.
Absolutely.
And that's tyrannical at its very core.
Completely.
But look, I think there's a lot of ineptitude in the South African government, but I just don't see a reason why that would be on the horizon. I mean, we've had much worse unrest events, and nothing even close to that has come along. So I think for me, maybe that side of the world is going to be forced onto them, but I think we need to, at least until that may happen, adopt a much more generative ground-up approach. And actually, the puck we're kind of skating towards at the Knowledge Trust is 2025. So in my opinion, for the 2 cents that it's worth, I think we should be at least 10x the current Bitcoin price by then. And why that's important, I honestly don't care about the price. I do my best not to look at it. But I think the main thing there is it should be a massive damper on volatility. Because you can see over time the volatility of Bitcoin is decreasing. And if we were at the market cap of gold, I think it would still be more volatile than gold. Because it would still have another probably 10 or 100x to go. But I think that it would be much less wild. And, for someone who is living hand to mouth, you just can't have that volatility. And I welcome stable coins on Lightning, and I think it's fairly imminent in the next 12 months. But that is a Band-Aid solution. We actually don't want that long term because it actually propagates the inflationary system. So I think for me, and at the Knowledge Trust, we want to be ready by 2025. So we don't want to be starting to think about it then. I'm a board member of a company called Cloud One, which builds a point of sale system for restaurants, guest houses, spas and shops, shebeens, called Tall Order. And we've got Lightning payments in the system. So hopefully within, I don't want to put a time frame on it because I think the team is realizing that it is tricky still to build with Lightning. And very fortunately, we've got the team from Lightning Labs helping out. But, at least then we'll be able to turn on a big volume of merchants who now can accept with Lightning invoices. And then I'd like to see kind of a map of sorts where we can say to people, hey, if you want to spend, and I very much encourage spend and replace. I made that mistake of spending my Bitcoin 6 years ago. And I regret it every day. But I do believe that if we want to propagate a circular economy, we have to spend it. And so, as I said, I took my little bundle that I'm underwater on, and I'm going to spend that. But as soon as it's spent, I'm replacing it. So I don't want to have that 5-year regret. But I do think that if we can start to slowly build out that merchant adoption, by the time the price is at a point of volatility that's acceptable, hopefully the Knowledge Trust will be at a few million members. We can put a wallet in each of their hands, figure out some way, I'm not entirely sure what that way is going to be, to get some Bitcoin in all of their hands. We can easily get Bitcoin in some of their hands because we pay our community bounties all the time for helping us out. We can do that with Bitcoin. But to get Bitcoin in all of their hands. And then if they can walk into a spaza shop and, buy a sandwich, a loaf of bread, if they can get on a taxi, which I think is a huge use case, and pay with their Lightning wallet, for me, in that moment, the strengths of the technology take over. Because once you've experienced that a few times, I had a coffee with Carl van Wyk this week, and we went to a coffee shop that purported itself to be Bitcoin friendly. They didn't even know what it was. I paid for the coffee, and Carl paid me on Lightning, and Lightning was faster than Yoko. Which was, so once you've experienced that and you're no longer carrying risky change in your pocket, surely phones get stolen a lot, but they can be secure. The wallets on there can be secure. Sure. I think at that point, the technology will take over because it is genuinely better. I don't believe we're trying to force a inferior solution down people's throats. The problem we face, I had a great meeting yesterday and it ended up, as is often the case, I'm sure you're the same, in the Bitcoin conversation. But the lady I was chatting to, I started talking about why I really believe Bitcoin can help Africa out of poverty. And in her mind, Bitcoin was about trading and about making money on price. She'd never considered for a second that actually it was much more important than that. And that's why I try to avoid the price conversation altogether. I don't trade. I don't have enough Bitcoin to ever get rich out of it. Well, look, if it's 100x, maybe. But, the opportunity is so much bigger than the price. And that's what no one sees. No one. I mean,
the network is more important than the value.
Yeah. People talk about Bitcoin's crossed the chasm. It is not even close. It's not even a tenth of the way to the side of the chasm. And until we have 1 to 10% of merchants accepting Lightning payments day to day, only then, but when we cross that chasm, and that's my prediction is about 2025, I think it's within 10 years, it's global currency.
Yeah. I had a guest on the show about 3-4 episodes back called Ben Ark. He's a Welsh Bitcoiner. And what Ben specializes in is building open source cheap hardware devices, amongst other things. He was the founder of LN Bits, which is an open source project for Lightning applications, extensions. And I really think this is the secret, because his hardware devices that accept offline Lightning payments when you're producing them individually, cost $8. When you're producing them at scale, you can bring that cost down to less than half. So in other words, you can create a scenario where you build a open source hardware device that's got no proprietary components, bang it together at scale. Let's say it costs you $5 to build. So what's that, 75 Rand? And you can have split payments. So me as a node operator can go and build a bunch of these devices and then go to merchants and say, hey guys, for free, here's a device for you. I'm going to take 1.5% of payments until this thing is paid off. Thereafter, I'll take a 0.5% routing fee and I'll manage your channels and do all of the channel balancing. Because make no mistake, that shit is technical, and you're not going to get a merchant to do channel balancing and run his own Lightning node yet. You know, you've got to ease them into it, and you can do the Uncle Jim custodial model to start with. So he trusts you. Potentially, you have a multi-sig scenario for a vault, etc., where you can reduce trust, all of that. The point being that you can route payments. You can become Visa or MasterCard or Yoko for these merchants on the Lightning Network and replace it. And then there's a direct incentive for someone to go and orange pill and onboard merchants into Lightning. And that incentive does not exist for Bitcoin. Because how do you get a merchant? How do you make a share of the revenue that a merchant brings through in Bitcoin? You can't do that. So on layer 2, this is possible. So you now have a model where you can incentivize people to go out into South Africa, the township, wherever, and just onboard merchants, be like, hand out these devices. And if the merchant doesn't adopt, it's 75 Rand gone. It's not a big deal. The others will make up for it. So that to me is a really, really interesting one, because normal POS devices are very expensive. Yoko has managed to bring that cost down dramatically, but still, I mean, a Yoko machine's worth like $1,000 you got to pay up front, I think. I could be wrong on this, but anyway, the point being that it's not open source. You can't build it yourself in your garage, and more importantly, it can't be built by 1,000 people in 1,000 different garages at the same time and rolled out, in a censorship resistant manner. And that's the key here, is building networks that are censorship resistant. Because as we've seen in Canada, if they can shut the rails off, they can shut down commerce. And the freedom to transact, I've recently come to realize that freedom to transact is more important than freedom of speech and right to bear arms and freedom of assembly and all of that. Because if you can't transact, you can't have any of the rest of the rights. Like, I can't go to a protest if I can't buy a bus ticket to get to the protest. So if they've stopped my ability to spend, they've stopped my ability to effectively protest. They've turned me into a pover, and I can't do anything about it. So there's a whole bunch of aspects that come in. Mesh networks are probably a very important component of this. And once again, Ben was speaking about building hardware devices that form mesh networks that are like $3 a device. And this is the key.
I must say, I worry that we are not far enough down the mesh network road yet.
Oh yeah.
Because one of the biggest attack vectors for Bitcoin is connectivity. And I would love to get a helium device and see how well it would work in a suburb and not a high rise. Yeah. Because if I can't connect to my neighbor, it's pointless. And he's probably 50 meters away, 30 meters away.
So I was thinking about this yesterday, actually. And I was like, what happens if the ISPs get taken down? Like in Kazakhstan, they had some protests, and the government shut down the ISPs. They turned off the internet. So internet gets turned off, can be turned off, will be turned off in a scenario like this. But we all sit in our houses. I'm looking at my Wi-Fi router, and if I turn on my Wi-Fi, I can see 10 different Wi-Fi routers that it picks up. Those devices should all be able to mesh with each other. So if the internet goes down, we, as a community that everyone lives around me in my complex, we should be able to mesh our devices so we can communicate with each other. And then if someone has an external connection, we can hop and route traffic. I mean, that's effectively what a mesh network is. So it's going to take a shift in mindset. And I think this decentralization shift is already happening. And the logical terminus of connectivity in a decentralized manner is mesh networks. And I totally agree with you. We're not far enough down this line of thinking yet. But there's solutions out there. I mean, these mesh devices Ben was talking about that he's built and you can build, they self-organize in like a swarm, So, for example, you get to a point where they're low power, so you can incentivize people to route Lightning payments through them to make themselves pay for themselves, and you hide it away in an external garden light. Sits in your garden with a solar panel on top, powers itself, and you only need, in the city bowl, you only need to have 100 of those in Cape Town to connect the whole city, for example, because maybe they've got a line of sight range, And now all of a sudden the internet goes down the entire city. can still communicate with each other, and you only need one connection to the broader internet to be able to bounce Bitcoin transactions, for example. So people can stay connected and they can stay transacting, because if you can stay transacting, you can resist tyranny. If you can't transact, tyranny is going to crush you because they hold all the cards. So for me, yeah, like mesh networks is as important as a Lightning network to make this all work. And there's no reason why your Lightning node can also not be a mesh network node that rebroadcasts transactions. Sorry,
it also
Jack,
makes
Do you
sense
know
for the incentivization of that network to be Lightning based. I think the Helium idea is genius, but it's using a currency that will fall away. I mean, I think another thing that people don't understand about money is Tier's law or Gresham's law, depending how you look at it. Harder money pushes out soft money. It's a universal principle. It's not like there's the exception, 1,200 years ago. No, there's no exception. In the history of every single money that has ever existed, of which there's like 50,000 different monies, the harder money has pushed out the softer money.
On a long enough time scale.
On a long enough time scale, of course. So Helium, a brilliant idea, great system, but that currency will fall away, which will destroy the system. So we have to build a mesh network that allows for micropayments, or that is incentivized through micropayments, to a currency that's usable, and that's clearly going to be Lightning. I mean, unless there's another technology that comes out on top of it.
Is there a reason the guys, or I maybe not know, that are facilitating Bitcoin Ikasi, are they leveraging mesh networks at all?
Not yet. So I'm mates with Herman from Bitcoin Ikasi, and Herman he's pulling this together. He runs his MPO called the Surfer Kids, and he's pulling together Bitcoin Ikasi, and he's getting input from the biggest Bitcoiners in the world are reaching out and they're trying to help out. But he's one guy. So this is what I implore to people whenever they hear about Bitcoin Ikasi is, if you have technical skills, reach out and get involved and be like, okay, I can help you implement X, Y, and Z, and I will take that on myself to implement X, Y, and Z, because he's one guy, and I think what he's trying to do is pull the community together. So he's absolutely interested in mesh networks. I had a discussion with him about this yesterday. Absolutely interested in it, but it's a case of like, cool, we need to get skills on the ground to roll this out, and this is where the open source model is so appealing, and what Ben Ark is working on with bringing these things together. It's like he just needs to do one workshop on how to build these hardware devices. You can order the components, you can incentivize people to roll these out alongside a Lightning node to route payments, and I think the mesh networks and Lightning merchant adoption needs to be rolled out simultaneously to build a robust network that can also route payments simultaneously. You don't have that central point of failure. Bitcoin Ikasi is a phenomenal project in its early stages, that I think if I could get any point across about it is like, if you want to get involved practically. Send Bitcoin, that's great, but actually go and like help them build stuff would be the most important.
Totally. Yeah, if I'm just looking at a basic human needs, I think South Africans on the ground struggle less to get connected to the internet than they do to transact. And if you combine those two together, and find a way for them to independently have the ability to communicate and pay each other, which is solving their basic need, then your adoption rates will go up. There's a few people I think we should talk to, Rob, independently of this, that I actually think might be really interested in that.
Yeah, man, it's exciting. And it changes the model of how you would, the VC model, for example, of how you bootstrap this network. Currently, like, we're all familiar with how the VC model works. But routing payments, for example, it's like decentralizing the financial power of MasterCard, or the financial earnings of MasterCard, for example. And if you can decentralize a payment network via mesh networks and get everyone who wants to contribute to that, get a slice of the pie, and you can gobble up MasterCard's payment share, their market share, but with 1 million different people. So you don't end up with another monopoly. You decentralize that monopoly.
The challenge there, Ricky, is that it's much harder for a VC to make money using that model, because it's so much easier to have a unique business idea, sure, wrap a shitcoin around it, hold the liquidity back on that shitcoin, get it listed on some exchanges, have the price go up, and slowly but surely exit to the retailers, to the retail traders. And
the classic
that's
slow motion rug
it's a brilliant model. I mean, if I was a VC, that's what I would do. I mean, you know, my love for Bitcoin aside, it's not a guarantee money maker, but it's a fairly sure bet in this current cash-rich economy. And making money off open networks is significantly harder.
I don't think VCs solve this problem. I don't think VCs are the ones who come and fix this. I think this gets
capital needs to flow. You know, where there's capital, there's people, you can build stuff. And so, you know, whether it's a VC or whatever kind of investor, we need capital coming from the outside to build systems. And, you know, things like Jay-Z and Jack Dorsey's B-Trust grant are great, but they're not going to build businesses. They're building, you know, and doing the important plumbing work. But for the innovation on top, there needs to be an emergence of business models that are as attractive to the shitcoin casino as the shitcoin casino. And it's not like business models that are attractive in a traditional sense. You've got to beat that. And if you look at some of the returns that some of the investors have got on some of the top 20 cryptos, they're phenomenal. I mean, some of the, you know, everyone talks about Multicoin and Solana, but, you know, there's countless examples.
If you can exit fast enough. If you can't exit fast enough, you go to zero.
Yeah, but sure, you know, you can't exit it at 100,000x, but you can exit it 50,000x. Shame.
Yeah, sure.
You know, so yes, there is a bit of go to zero, but the VCs are smarter than the retail traders on aggregate, and so they're selling at the right time. And it comes out, so much of it is about liquidity, because if you list a token and only, let's say, 5% of the supply is listed, you get such a false perspective of the market cap of that token, which drives the narrative, which drives the price, and slowly but surely you exit along the way. I mean, it's a brilliant system. It just doesn't serve humanity in the long term.
Not at all. I see it as it's just another manifestation of the fiat system that has created perverse outcomes. So I think the Bitcoin revolution and the Lightning revolution runs off the back of small business. Small and local entrepreneurs. I think that because any approach to Bitcoin that is top down is going to fail at this point in the life cycle of Bitcoin. And I would argue anyway. I think a grassroots, ground up approach is how Bitcoin has grown thus far, and it's how Bitcoin will succeed going forward. People look for nation state adoption. I'm like, you know, guys, you need to get the population needs to adopt it before the nation. If you want to front run the bankers, that's how it's got to go. So it's and that's how it has been proceeding. Like, for example, Canadian truckers are adopting Bitcoin. That'll be followed by the rest of Canada, which will then eventually be followed by the Canadian government. We can hope. So I see this model of being able to roll out cheap open source hardware devices for local entrepreneurs to manage liquidity pools and manage Lightning in the back end. For, let's say, he's got 50 merchants that he's managing liquidity for, and he's doing the Lightning thing in the background. That's a small business, right? Like a small business owner is 1-2 people, he employs a few people maybe. That's what drives the economy, and it decentralizes the economy, because it's much easier for a government to regulate 20,000 massive big businesses than it is for them to regulate 20 million entrepreneurs. They just don't have, especially across the Lightning network that's decentralized. So it builds a much more robust framework for humanity. But I agree with you, like, it's got to outcompete that shitcoin casino model, because capital obviously is limited and it goes to wherever it can get the best return. And not everyone is principled and willing to take a short-term knock. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't have all the answers, but it's something we got to overcome in the Bitcoin network, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, as I said, I can't see a way that Bitcoin isn't inevitable, but what matters is the time frame. So, you know, if I was going to bet, I'd say it's going to be the global currency by the end of the century, but I'm going to be dead by then. And apart from my family, my number one reason for living a long life, for wanting to not die, is to see hyper-Bitcoinization. But I think that with some strategic efforts, it can be the next 5 or 10 years. 5 is pushing it, 10 is more realistic. But it's going to require some different approaches, and I really hope the Knowledge Trust can play a role there, because if using my 2025 example, if we can have, let's say, for argument's sake, 5 million members by then, and if you look at our current trajectory, we should be about there, and we can put, let's say, 100 Rand of Bitcoin in each of their hands, and allow let's say the taxi operators where they work, educate them, put a QR code up in the window, and suddenly, bang, you've got a circular economy. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners, I think, are complacent, and it's kind of have fun staying poor, and we'll see on the other side. And I again, I think on the long time frame, that's inevitable because of Gresham's law. It is the hardest money. There's no escaping that fact, and you can't replace it because. And this is also something it took me a while for the penny to drop. But people say, but it's not the best technology. What happens if a better technology comes along? But by definition, that would require a small group of people, which therefore by definition would not be decentralized. I mean, this whole Satoshi thing absolutely blows my mind. The other story that I wish I could find out more about is the beginning of Bitcoin Beach, because anonymous person comes along, donates a bunch of Bitcoin to the small rural town, and says you have to use it as an economy. Now, I mean, maybe that was Satoshi. He just thought, hey, we've reached a certain point, we're ready for this. I mean, I think there's at least a 1% chance Satoshi came from the future, because in 200 years' time, when we're all ruled by 10 people in their ivory towers, he thought, hey, I'm going to jump in the time machine and go back and launch this blockchain thing. He'd be sitting there thinking, why proof of stake? Why? These idiot humans. But it's an immaculate conception, and that just cannot be replicated.
Yeah, I tell you, who didn't donate the seed funds for Bitcoin Beach, and that's Craig Wright. Wasn't him. he's too busy paying legal fees to donate money to Bitcoin Beach. Yeah, man. It's so offline. I'll speak to you guys about a couple of contacts where I really think that Knowledge Trust can synergize well with Lightning adoption, because there's a social network in South Africa that has a couple of million users, and I know the CEO, and they are frothing for Lightning. Like, these guys get it completely. And this to me is what gives me hope, where you see CEOs of companies who have built a big network effect, and they have completely been orange pilled. They're like, the fiat system is bullshit. They see the choke points. They're dealing with it on a daily basis. They've incorporated wallets into what they do as well. So they see it, and they're like, right, Lightning is the answer to this. And no shit coins, like, we passed that phase, thank goodness, of these guys. So it's this is what gives me hope. It's not the big banker types in South Africa give me hope at all. It's like the small startups that are working, like, chowing at the edges of the big establishment that are.
But look, Lightning gives me a lot of hope, but I think we have to look at Lightning as not the right analogy, but like the internet. The internet itself, just by itself, can sit in the corner and not do anything for us. It's what you build on top of it. And in fact, at the Knowledge Trust, that's, kind of where we are. We're on a 1-year journey to being as Bitcoin as we can be. So from 1 January next year, all the staff will get paid in Bitcoin. Any suppliers that we possibly can. I mean, it's, you can't pay the government yet in Bitcoin. But the reason why we're doing that is because I don't think the innovation has been thought of yet. What is it that's going to take the Lightning Network to the world? So we need to create a team that is that Bitcoin, they live in a Bitcoin world themselves, and then the innovation will come, because our team understands our community, and it's by taking this opportunity, Lightning, which on its own delivers nothing, and figuring out how to bring that to our community in a way that's meaningful to them. And I don't think we've even come close to that innovation yet. So, we've got a few years to get there. I'm impatient, but it's about really creating a culture for me. And, your mate for the social network, I think that's the same need is, just turning on Lightning, what's that going to do? We've got to find those million little innovations that sit around it. But sure, it's so exciting. I started my first business in '99, and I didn't have a plan at all. But I was at UCT, and I had a lecture by Mark Shuttleworth, and he was amazing. And I just wanted to kind of do what he was doing. I mean, obviously he's much smarter than me, but I just wanted to be in the internet. But weirdly, I felt that I was late in '99, and obviously in hindsight, way early. And we were poor for about 6 years because we were way early. But it feels incredible, and I feel so grateful, because I think this is the second internet. And here we get to have the hindsight of the last 20 years and learn really about how evolution and innovation happens on open networks. and how it does take a
Yes.
long time. We tend to, that old cliche, underestimate technology in the short run, overestimate in the short run, underestimate in the long run.
Yeah.
And time is compressed in our minds, but Facebook feels fairly overnighty. It's like a 15-year-old company now, but it took a long time to take off, to get out of itself, and we still, I know it gets said a lot on Bitcoin Twitter, but we really are so early, and until it's a no-brainer for 10% of the population, we're not going to go anywhere.
Now, I think we can't predict how an open network is going to grow and what's going to come from it. But that's the beauty of it, right? Like open networks, it's like hard money drives out soft money. Open networks drive out closed networks, just because of network effects. And the initial growth curve is slower on an open network. Adoption rates are lower because incentive structures aren't there like they are in a closed network. But over time, as they reach scale and grow exponentially, they'll just far outcompete. Unless
in 2001, my business partner Craig Raw, who is the person who orange pilled me, he tried 11 years ago, and I didn't listen. He eventually succeeded 18 months ago. Should have listened. But he said to me,
the most phenomenal wallet product that
it's incredible. And he said to me in 2001, 2002, we were building kind of websites, doing digital marketing for people, and he said, Rob, we need to focus entirely on open source. And at the time, we were, I think, building in .NET or something like that, ASP, some Microsoft something or other. And certainly at the time, the world was not running the internet on open source platforms. And I looked at this and I thought, we feels like we're anti-trend here. And he made the point, open networks win. And because I'm not a technical person, I can have a conversation with Craig. He's much smarter than me. I trusted him, and it was one of the best decisions we ever made, because within 10 years, everyone who was building server-side stuff on a Microsoft platform was now behind the curve. I used to go into clients and they'd say, we have Microsoft Windows, so you must build in ASP.NET. And I'd say, what do you know that every single other big Indian internet company doesn't know, except Microsoft, obviously? Because they all run Apache. What do you know that they don't? Big South African corporate. And there was only legacy, and particularly in South Africa, legacy that was dragging in there. Open networks win. It does sometimes takes a very long time, but they will win. And that is just one of the many reasons why what we are sitting on is inevitable, but I am impatient, especially in Africa, because so many of our problems come down to the money. I heard a stat the other day that there's more than 1 billion women in the world who have hindered access to financial facilities, banking or what have you. And for the number one reason they have hindered access is men, which is just terrible. And Bitcoin just solves that. You can keep your bank account in your head in 12 words. No one needs to know. If you need to flee for whatever reason from an oppressive regime or an abusive husband, you can now do it. And it's absolutely game-changing. It's amazing to think that there's never been an asset that couldn't be taken away from you. There's nothing, never in the history of mankind, there's never been an asset that you could, no one knows that you have. And the underlying promise of that technology, I don't think we've even considered how far that can take humanity.
It bootstraps freedom, man. Like it's Bitcoin is a Trojan horse for freedom, which for me is because my primary political value is freedom, and so that's why what attracted me to Bitcoin in the first place. And you just keep learning once you go down the rabbit hole. Like it's just deeper and deeper, and like it's a very beautiful thing. And like you say, to liberate a billion people from oppressive forms of money, essentially, is what it comes down to. Because if you give someone the right to control the money printer, they will abuse it. And this is, what happens.
Even actually with the best intentions, I think I'm not an anti-statist. I believe governance, not governments, is necessary. And I do believe that most people, particularly most people in a position of power, in a position of governance, have honest intentions. But the incentive structure. What do you say they had? Yeah, they do get. The unfortunate reality is democracy tends to pervert incentives of democracy tend to pervert the incentives of the individual. But I believe we need governance, and so I can't see a world where that goes away completely and we just run around like anarchists. But it needs to change and it needs to serve its people more. I love the kind of concept from the sovereign individual, the smaller nation state really acting as a service provider. And if you live in Johannesburg now, you're more than likely going to live in a cluster development. And if you've got two next to each other in Bryanston and they're both equal, they all look like Tuscan houses, but one has got good value for money governance.
As is the custom in Joburg.
Yeah, it is. I grew up in Joburg. It's a lovely place at times.
Love it,
but one has got good governance, one has got rubbish governance. You're going to stay in the one with good governance. And we now live in a world, thanks to COVID, where that's entirely possible. Not for everyone, for sure, but the mobility of humans has never been so great. And so, you now have to treat your customers well as a nation state. And I think the big nation states are going to only realize that probably in a generation's time, once it's too late. But the smaller ones are getting there.
Well, to your point, look at El Salvador. El Salvador is looking at what every tyrannical large government is doing, and they're doing the opposite. They're saying, bring your money, bring your capital, no vaccine passports, we're maximizing freedom, no capital gains tax, no state duties, none of that bullshit. Bring your money, come. El Salvador's GDP is like approaching double digits. Their tourism sector has grown by 30% since they started introducing like pro-Bitcoin bills. Like El Salvador is booming. Like every Bitcoin you speak to is like, El Salvador looking real good right now. Only problem is you got to fly through the US to get there from here.
No, I didn't know that.
You can probably route around. You can probably fly to Mexico first, and because Mexico is quite lax on this stuff as well.
Suddenly boats are looking very attractive in the world of tyranny.
Look at boats. Look, we can have a whole episode on just owning a sailboat, man, because like that, if you want to be a sovereign individual, like that's where it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, my wife refuses to be anywhere where she can't see the land. She's a good swimmer, so if she can see the land, she backs herself to take all 4 children on her back to that land. But we're not going beyond the land, so the sailboat's out for me.
It just depends how tyrannical the government gets. She might change her opinion.
That's true. That's true. Look, I mean, I want to say El Salvador, I don't think is a panacea.
No.
There are some questionable things happening there. Sure. For example, their gay rights are not great. The women's rights are not great. And a lot of that is legacy legislation that I don't think it's Bukele. And he, on the surface, seems like a very progressive, smart. He gets it. I love his Twitter banter. I mean, the IMF doesn't.
That's great. The IMF stuff is amazing.
But I want to wait and see there because he gets enough flack on Twitter, for example, about the gay rights issues, and so he can't not know about it or have not thought about it. And I want to see some action there because, to oppress a group of people because of their sexual orientation is tyrannical. And so it's all very well and good to say, we're the home of freedom unless you're gay. That doesn't work for me.
Yeah, no, for
sure. So they've got some work to do, but they're making progress.
Yeah, and things like his brother being deeply involved in the Chivo wallet, for example.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah,
so I found this out once again from Ben Ark. He's like, Chivo's a piece of shit. It's a really cuck wallet, and Bukele's brother's involved. So that's government for you, where there's opportunities for corruption, they will be taken. So,
but look, that's the beauty of Bitcoin. It's an open system.
Right.
The clever, the smart asses, when I try and orange pill people with my Lightning payment, the smart asses always say to me, but you can do that with SnapScan, you can do it with Venmo. I say, but can you do it from Venmo to SnapScan? Because that you can't do. It's closed walls, you can do anything. But show me jumping from what, with your SnapScan app, now pull up my FNB app, can you send me that instantly settled? No, you can't. But with the open network, you can.
Can you do it as a Canadian trucker? No, you can't, because your account's been turned off.
So I think for me, the Chivo wallet, I didn't know about the brother thing, which does worry me, but it feels just like an MVP. And I'm a big believer in not overthinking your product, just get it in the market. And then listen to your customers and repeat. And I hope that is what the Chivo wallet is in its spirit.
Yeah, it's a government project. They don't listen to customers. If there's one thing government's very good at, is not listening to customers, because they don't have customers. They got serfs. So, but the open network is so important. And Bukele gets this. He's like, it's interoperable. So, sort of the Lightning aspect of Chivo sucks. So I don't think people should be placing a lot of stock in Chivo. But this is a progression, like custodial. When you enter Bitcoin, you go through a custodial model. Then after 6 months, you're like, the self-custody thing is pretty important. And then you move your coins to your own self-custody. So I think you'll see a proliferation of open source self-custody wallets popping up in El Salvador already. It is the epicenter of Bitcoin kind of in the world at the moment. People are just flocking in there, doing education, all kinds of stuff. So I hold hope. But I think Tonga's interesting. I mean, Lord Fasatua from Tonga has been harping on about Bitcoin for a while. I think they're going to be moving that route probably pretty soon.
I'm excited about Tonga because I'm always looking at backup country options, and I like it because it's got an unbelievably fast internet connection, like one of the fastest out there. Its region and climate suits me. It's got good fishing. It's got good diving.
Good
yeah. And I like the idea of the small island life. I love the Seychelles. So it's a bit far from the family, but as far as backup options go, I think it's in the pool.
Look, this is why Mauritius needs to adopt Bitcoin, because this solves a lot of problems for South Africans. My business
there's no fish in Mauritius, unfortunately. They've stolen them all. So for me, as a fisherman, it's
but Bass's to India is not too far, right?
That is true.
Of atolls not too far away.
Yeah.
So my business partner Brandon has just moved to Mauritius. So he's over there now, and the South African expat community there is massive, and it's growing like exponentially. Mauritius isn't without its problems, but one of the problems it doesn't have is capital gains tax and foreign exchange controls. So as a Bitcoiner wanting to move somewhere where like that respects your sovereignty, like that's a pretty good option. Obviously Mauritius is not a panacea once again, but I don't think everything's about trade-offs. I don't think like a panacea exists.
No. Look, I was there a month ago, and we were in a taxi, and some person raced past at high speed on a very fast motorbike, and they didn't even have a helmet on, but they did have a mask. So on my matrix of backup country options, sensible, they lost a few points there.
But I mean, look, like those are individuals, right? What can you do?
No, it's like that because you if you get in a taxi in Mauritius, you have to wear a mask, and it's hot there. It's seriously hot. Yeah, they're not allowed to use the air conditioner in the taxi anymore, so they can have the windows open, but you must wear a mask. Yeah, not allowed to use the air conditioners in the taxis. But you frequently see people in Mauritius, one person in a car with a mask on, which I don't think is the individual's choice. It's because that is the law, and you get in trouble if you don't, which doesn't make any sense to me at all.
No. I see people driving with a mask on in South Africa, which I know is not the law, and I see people riding motorbikes with a mask on. I'm like, bro, you had the mind virus, the brain worm has gone deep. Like this is...
But this is why education is so important, because it's very easy to hoodwink people who can't think critically. And, I don't want to create a world where everyone agrees with me, but I want to create a world where people can make better decisions for themselves, for their families, for their countries, for the world. And that is underpinned by education and the ability to think critically. It's not just about learning facts about, horses and money. It's about taking data points and sifting them in your head and finding the truth. It's just so important in this world today because the mainstream media always has an axe to grind. I've got this tab in my browser called Tweets, which is, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I don't really use fun stuff, but it's like all the news sites. But when I finish a piece of work, I open up all the tabs, but it's like CNN, Fox, BBC, etc., and I triangulate. Because if it's only on one, it's a lie. I'm almost certain of that. If it's out of 5 news sites, if it's only on the one, it's either a lie or the story's been so manipulated. But if you see that, Russia invades Ukraine across all 5 sites, it's actually happened.
Yes. I was having this exact conversation with my colleagues yesterday, because my colleagues are quite normie, and throughout COVID and Bitcoin, I've been saying certain things that have now all turned out largely to be true. And they're like, now finally, previously they called me a conspiracy theorist, all the things. And now they're like, where'd you get your news from? And I was like, multiple sources, guys. You got to synthesize it together to get a clear understanding of who's bullshitting and who's not. And then that's like, they're like, but that's so difficult. You mean you don't just go to CNN and listen to like Jake Tapper? And I'm like, no, is that what you do? Dude, like this is dangerous. Like this is how you put yourself in a very dangerous situation. Like synthesize, you have to. And exactly what you're saying, like go to multiple sources. And unfortunately, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance.
Yeah,
is what it is.
Russell Brand's got a great little skit that he put out in the last few weeks about CNN and their war correspondents, who not the people in the field, but they're kind of the analysts, and they never tell you what who's backing these analysts, where they hold shares, etc., etc. So you've got someone coming along, and Brian Stelter says, do you think we should have war? And war is definitely the right option. And then you look, he owns shares in Lockheed Martin, and exactly. So, but they never disclose any of that stuff. And I think that's really not cool, because if you want to be a news outlet that informs people, you have to give all the information in a digestible way. Don't flood people, because that can often be a tactic in itself. But you're not a credible news organization if you're only telling one half of the story. It's not fair.
Yeah. For example, like a CNN correspondent could be standing on the ground in Ukraine, watching a Russian jet fly over, shoot a building, and he's like, this is terrible. But then he sees a Ukrainian anti-air missile being launched, and that anti-air missile is built by Raytheon, and he's like, great. There you go. My stock has just gone up, because like I own a bunch of Raytheon. And that's in a nutshell what's happening with these big publications like CNN. It's if anyone still believes the mainstream media is a credible source of information, you put yourself in a dangerous place, because you're not going to make it.
But so many really wise people that I respect immensely do.
And they lose.
I mean, I was having this conversation with one of the most people I respect the most in the world. His name, Sean mentioned, and he's 30 years older than me, way more successful than I'll ever be. And he said, I triangulate. I read the FT, the Guardian, and the Times. And I think that's not triangulation.
That's triangulation.
Within your bubble, like everything in my bubble agrees with the bubble. No, that's not. You've got to go. I literally spend all my day talking and learning about Bitcoin. But the number one thing I search for on Spotify podcasts, on YouTube, etc., is Ethereum. Why Bitcoin's going to fail? I want to know that stuff, because I know we live in a Bitcoin echo chamber. It actually freaks me out at times. And I think there's a lot of good stuff that we can take from other cryptos, Ethereum primarily. And I want to know what I don't know. But when I talk to really smart people, they don't approach things that way. And that worries me, because they end up making decisions that are not based on the full information set.
I think the future belongs to the generalist and not the specialist anymore. Because if you are able to grab a bunch of skills, it's just like grabbing information from a bunch of sources, to apply those usefully somewhere, like that's how you're going to make real change and progress for yourself personally, and for change starts at home. So if you are specializing in CNN, for example, or specializing in the Guardian, or specializing in Fox News, you're going to run into trouble. Just like if you in the future you specialize in accounting or law, for example, that job is going to be automated away, and you're going to be left thinking, how did this happen to me? And we see this already with a bunch of people who held jobs 20 years ago that were highly specialized, and they're really sought after, and now they're not anymore. Take people who code on Ruby on Rails, for example. Like, those guys specialize in that, and now what now? So being able to code in multiple languages is probably a much more better way to go for it. Guys, what's the time? Oof, past. I'm going to be late for work. Guys, I really want to thank you for your time. Two things before we go. You guys, are both you in Cape Town, by the way? Because we are having a Bitcoin meetup tonight on Long Street, actually. So if you guys are free this evening, very last minute, Bitcoin meetup, I'll chat to you offline about that. And anyone who's watching this is going to watch this after the Bitcoin meetup, so look, keep an eye out for the next one. And then secondly, where can people find you guys, find your work, follow what you're doing, and potentially get involved if need be?
Yeah, so thanks so much for having us, Ricky. I have been writing down many notes and thoughts and ideas after listening to your guys' invigorating conversation for how we can actually make some of this into reality for our members, because we need to. So the Knowledge Trust exists online. Please find us at knowledgetrust.org. We're on all social channels, the Knowledge Trust, on Twitter at Knowledge Trust. Please speak to us. As Rob said, we are very passionate about listening to what our members in our community need, and understanding what on the ground will really make a difference, so that we can build that and make that accessible. So please follow us, find us, become a member. Hopefully we can help you reach your potential. Hopefully we can get you onto Bitcoin and Lightning and change the world.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that is, obviously it's a show for Bitcoiners, so everyone listening hopefully is stacked some sats. And my plea would be to spend some of them. Spend and replace. Don't have the regrets that I have. But that's the way this thing is going to take root and build roots that can't be shaken if we start creating an economy. And so find your favorite coffee shop, your favorite small retailer, and go and talk to them. It was easier than I thought to onboard Super Beats in Kenilworth. I think they were quite surprised when I walked in here the one day and made the suggestion, but I've now bought from them a few times on Lightning. And I think, if every Bitcoiner in South Africa could do one a week, it would be game-changing. And if there's a young coder out there who could build a simple Google Maps mashup to overlay small business retail onto a map showing us where we can go and spend our sats, I think that would be game-changing.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And we're definitely going to pick up this conversation again soon. And yeah, guys, go check out the Knowledge Trust. Follow the guys on Twitter. Jaryd, Rob, both of you on Twitter, right?
Yeah, I'm at Rob Stokes.
At Jaryd Raizon.
Okay, there you go, guys. Cool, guys.
Thanks, Ricky.
Have a good one. And we'll chat to you soon.
Thanks, Ricky.
Cheers.
Ciao. Bye.